In the quiet streets of Virginia's old towns, church steeples rise above brick rooftops and cobblestone lanes, silent guardians over centuries of history. By day, the churches appear serene. Stained glass windows glow with sunlight. Bells ring to mark the hour. But after sunset, the air changes. Whispers echo down empty aisles. Shadows move behind pews where no one sits. Footsteps follow visitors across cracked stone floors. Locals say these old churches remember every sermon, every prayer, every sorrow. Some congregations vanished overnight. Some ministers were never seen again. And some churches hold the souls of those who refuse to leave. Visitors who linger at night report doors opening by themselves, lights flickering in empty sanctuaries, and figures standing silently at the altar, watching. Tonight, we will walk through Virginia's most haunted old town churches, places where faith and fear intertwine, and where the past still prays through the shadows. If you were standing alone in a centuries-old church and felt someone breathe beside you in a pew, would you turn to look, or would you remain still, hoping they vanish before you see them? Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are safe tonight, because what we are about to explore is not for the faint of heart. Virginia's old town churches are filled with stories. Some are of devotion and beauty, others of tragedy and fear. These churches have witnessed generations of lives, both joyous and sorrowful. Some were sites of unexplainable accidents. Some were built over sacred grounds with long-forgotten histories. Some have walls that seem to whisper after centuries of prayers. Visitors speak of sudden cold drafts in the middle of summer, shadows moving in corners, and the feeling of being watched while kneeling or sitting in pews. Candles flicker though there is no wind, footsteps echo in halls that are empty, and eyes appear in stained glass watching the living walk beneath them. Before we enter these sacred yet haunted spaces, let me ask you something. If you heard a faint hymn sung softly behind the altar with no one present, would you approach to listen? Or would you step away and leave the church in silence? St. Annia's forgotten chapel rests quietly at the edge of a narrow cobblestone lane, surrounded by overgrown hedges and the shadow of tall, ancient trees. By day, it appears peaceful and solemn, a small stone structure with worn steps leading to an arched wooden door. Sunlight illuminates the moss along the walls, and birds occasionally flit across the roof, giving the impression of timeless serenity. Visitors walking by often feel a sense of calm, drawn to the simplicity of its design and the quiet of its grounds. As sunset approaches, the chapel begins to take on a different character. Shadows stretch across cobblestones, mingling with the fading light. The air grows cooler, and the wind carries a faint scent of damp stone and aged wood. The silence that once felt peaceful becomes heavier, more attentive. The chapel seems aware of the approaching darkness, holding itself still as night settles around it. After the sun has fully disappeared, the first sounds emerge. Soft weeping drifts through the air, carried on the breeze that rustles the leaves and the hedges surrounding the chapel. The sound is low and mournful, intimate yet impossible to locate precisely. Visitors pause, uncertain whether to move closer or retreat. Stepping onto the worn stone path, the chapel's presence intensifies. Shadows lengthen beneath the surrounding trees, casting irregular shapes across the ground. Inside the chapel, the interior is visible through narrow windows. Something subtle appears different. Shapes move gently within the pews, kneeling in silent prayer. Their outlines are dark and shifting, indistinct yet unmistakably human. They do not rise or turn, remaining focused entirely on the altar at the front. Visitors often feel compelled to enter. The wooden doors, though locked, seem to invite attention. Some report hearing creaks and soft thuds, as if the doors open and close of their own accord. There is no key turning. No physical presence of a hand. Yet the sound is unmistakable, a gentle motion echoing against the stone walls. Inside the chapel, the atmosphere deepens. Soft light from the moon filters through stained glass, casting faint patterns on the floor. Shadows of kneeling figures stretch along the pews, elongated and almost tangible. The sound of weeping continues, layered with subtle sighs and murmurs, filling the small space with an emotional resonance that is both sorrowful and calm. The temperature seems cooler, and the air carries the faint scent of old incense and stone that has absorbed decades of devotion. The figures do not respond to visitors. Walking among the pews reveals no physical form. They remain silhouettes of motionless prayer, only their shadows hinting at human presence. Observers report a sense of reverence, as if the chapel is capturing the energy of those who once knelt here and projecting it into the night. Wood creaks softly beneath imagined weight. Steps echo faintly on the stone floors. Doors shift in place without hands. Each sound is subtle but precise, reinforcing the sensation of a living memory inhabiting the chapel. Nothing threatens, yet every detail draws attention and heightens awareness. Visitors often describe a feeling of disorientation. Time feels different here. Minutes may stretch, or the weeping seems to echo longer than it should. Shadows move in ways that are almost independent of light. The air feels denser, as if carrying centuries of whispered prayers and muted emotion. Some pause at the altar. The space seems charged with reflection and remembrance. Kneeling shapes appear more distinct here, aligned along invisible lines of devotion. The weeping rises slightly, creating the impression of communal sorrow. Visitors rarely speak, sensing the presence of something not wholly visible, yet deeply familiar in intent. The experience often leaves an emotional impact. A sense of quiet mourning, tempered with reverence, settles over anyone standing within the chapel or on the steps. It is not fear, but a profound awareness of lives that passed through this space. Those who linger too long report feeling melancholy, as if absorbing fragments of memory left behind by the countless souls who once prayed here. By morning, the chapel appears unchanged. Sunlight illuminates stone walls and wooden doors. Moss glows softly in the light. The shadows vanish. The sounds of weeping fade with the arrival of birds and wind. Footsteps and the quiet motion of people passing by restore ordinary life. The chapel seems inert, as if it never held movement or memory at all. Yet for those who have been present at night, the experience lingers. They recall shadows kneeling in silent devotion, doors that moved without touch, and weeping that filled the small stone chapel with soundless sorrow. It is a memory of presence, of devotion, and of the gentle persistence of the past in a space that seems forgotten by the world. It is a memory of presence, of devotion, and of the gentle persistence of the past in a space that seems forgotten by the world. St. Anne's forgotten chapel does not threaten or chase. It preserves echoes. It holds memory. It offers a brief glimpse into devotion that continues beyond living time, allowing visitors to feel the weight of countless prayers and silent remembrance. And when night returns, the chapel quietly awakens once more. Its shadows kneeling, its doors creaking, and its soft weeping carrying across the cobblestones into the darkness. Trinity Hollow Church stands quietly in a secluded courtyard, surrounded by towering walls and shadowed walkways. By day, the building appears still and dignified, its stone facade catching sunlight and casting sharp edges across the courtyard. The doors are heavy, the windows tall, and the air carries the faint scent of old wood and stone. Visitors walk through without pause, feeling the calm of a place meant for reflection and quiet thought. As night falls, the atmosphere shifts. The courtyard grows darker, shadows stretching from walls and trees alike. The air grows cooler, heavier, filled with a sense of expectation. The church seems to gain weight, as if the stone itself presses inward, holding the space in quiet anticipation. Footsteps echo softly across the courtyard, uneven and measured, yet no one appears nearby. The sound drifts through the night, circling the building and moving along the aisles inside, imperceptible in source yet unmistakable in presence. Inside, the church feels deeper, heavier still. Vaulted ceilings catch faint moonlight, filtering through tall windows to create pale patterns on the stone floors. Every step taken echoes farther than expected, bouncing off pews and walls in ways that make the space feel larger than it is. Visitors pause, listening as the sound of movement seems to exist independently of their own. The echo of footsteps continues, measured and steady, yet there is no one visible to produce it. Lantern lights appear next. Faint glows shimmer across walls and floors, moving slowly along corridors and around pews. They illuminate carved details in the wood, flickering over stone surfaces with soft, inconsistent rhythm. No hand holds the lanterns, no cord or chain supports them. They drift like ghosts, guiding attention without revealing purpose or origin. Some who watch feel compelled to follow them. The lights move quietly, encouraging observers to trace their paths. Each lantern glides along the aisle or climbs along the walls, casting shadows that shift subtly with motion. The effect is hypnotic, drawing focus entirely to the movement while the rest of the church recedes into peripheral awareness. A chill begins to settle in. The air feels cooler around the shoulders and neck. Some visitors report a sensation of cold hands brushing gently, fleeting but undeniable. The feeling is never painful or threatening, only insistent, as though the space itself reaches outward. As though the space itself reaches outward. It passes quickly, yet leaves awareness heightened, a sense that presence lingers unseen. The echoing footsteps and drifting lights continue. Each element seems aware of those observing. Footsteps quicken subtly when attention wanders, slowing when focus sharpens. Lanterns pause for a moment, then resume their journey, aligning with movement in the aisle or along the walls. The church feels alive, not with sound or movement alone, but with the awareness of space itself. Time stretches within Trinity Hollow. Minutes feel longer, breaths more deliberate. Glances at clocks or watches provide little reassurance. Observers lose track of sequence, caught in a rhythm dictated by echo, light, and subtle sensation. The more one focuses on the elements, the more the space dominates perception. Some walk toward the sounds. They move along the aisle, guided by footsteps that do not belong to them and lanterns that drift just ahead. The sensation of cold contact intensifies briefly, brushing shoulders or arms, drawing attention without fear. Shadows deepen, stretching over pews and floors, emphasizing the separation between light and dark, known and unseen. The church remains structurally unchanged. Pews do not move. Doors remain closed. Windows stand intact. There is no visible source for the lights, the sounds, or the subtle touches. Yet the space carries a presence unmistakable in sensation and observation. Recognizing it as more than architecture and design. By dawn, the church returns to stillness. Moonlight fades. Lanterns vanish, leaving no trace of motion. The sensation of unseen hands disappears completely. The building stands quiet, ordinary in its dignity, holding only the memory of night. Those who leave carry the experience with them. They recall movement without source, light without holder, and touch without contact. Time feels altered in memory, longer and more deliberate. Awareness of the space remains acute even after leaving the courtyard and walking back into the normal rhythm of day. Locals speak of Trinity Hollow Church quietly. They recognize its history, the generations of worship and reflection, and also its ability to shape perception at night. The church holds memory, rhythm, and presence in ways that cannot be explained fully. Trinity Hollow Church continues to watch silently. By day, it serves its purpose as a place of gathering and reflection. By night, it transforms into a space where footsteps echo without source, lanterns drift unheld, and the air carries subtle reminders of presence. Visitors who step inside after dark walk through more than stone and pews. They experience awareness made tangible, sensation made visible, and memory made immediate. The church does not chase or threaten. It observes. It guides. And in its quiet, secluded courtyard, Trinity Hollow waits, patient and enduring, ready to remind anyone who enters that some spaces are alive not through motion alone, but through the attention they command. St. Michaela's silent spire rises above the town with quiet authority, its stone walls catching the last light of day and casting long shadows across the streets. By daylight, it appears solemn but welcoming, its arched windows and carved facades drawing attention without intimidation. Visitors approach along cobblestone paths, hearing only the occasional church bell and the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. The spire feels like a place of history, of ritual and reflection, solid and unmoving. As night falls, the spire transforms. Shadows stretch across the exterior and deepen within the entryway. The heavy doors creak under their own weight, opening to a space that swallows sound. The air inside grows thick and still, cooler than the surrounding night, carrying the scent of aged stone and candle wax. Silence dominates, oppressive in its completeness, pressing against the body and drawing attention to every subtle movement. Then the chanting begins. Voices arise softly, low and resonant, echoing through vaulted ceilings and long corridors. Shadows appear along the hallways. Dim and shifting, they move with purpose, pacing between columns and along walls. Their forms are human, though indistinct, blurred at the edges by darkness. They do not respond to observation. They do not pause when watched. Their path is deliberate, a quiet repetition that suggests awareness yet remains unapproachable. Figures kneel before it in endless succession, motionless yet fully present. Their outlines are dark against candlelight, heads bowed, hands clasped, bodies still. Observers report a strange tension in the air, the weight of devotion or ritual pressing against the senses. The figures appear eternal, caught in a cycle that does not end, their stillness contrasted by the movement of chanting that flows through the space. Every sound echoes unnaturally. Steps on stone floors reverberate longer than expected. The faint adjustment of robes or the subtle brush of a hand against a pew amplifies in the vaulted halls. Each echo blends with chanting and shadows, forming a layered soundscape that feels larger and older than the building itself. Visitors often describe a sensation of being observed. It is subtle at first, a prickle along the neck or a weight on the chest. The feeling does not come from the shadows themselves. It is as if the spire watches through its silence, aware of attention and presence. Standing still heightens the sensation, while movement does little to diminish it. Light behaves differently within the spire. Candle flames flicker in patterns that do not align with airflow. Shadows cast by statues twist slowly, elongating and contracting in ways that cannot be explained by ordinary illumination. Reflection from polished stone surfaces sometimes reveals movement where none exists. The chanting grows more immersive as night deepens. Voices rise slightly in tone, layering phrases together in cycles that repeat yet shift. The resonance carries through every hall, filling alcoves and chambers that lead nowhere. Observers report that focus narrows naturally, the mind drawn toward the altar and the kneeling figures. Even those who enter only briefly feel compelled to follow the sound deeper into the spire. Attempts to interact fail. Calling out meets only echoes. Steps toward shadows dissolve into empty corridors. The kneeling figures remain steadfast, undisturbed by approach or retreat. The environment resists intrusion, maintaining order and ritual in ways that feel deliberate and precise. Local history offers context. St. Michael's Spire has stood for centuries, a center of worship, guidance, and ceremony. Soldiers, townsfolk, and clergy moved through its halls, observing rituals and maintaining watch over the altar and congregation. Over time, routines became so ingrained that memory may have imprinted itself on the architecture, carrying repetition into the present night. Some believe the chanting and shadows are echoes of this history. Footsteps and whispers may linger in stone. Figures kneeling may be impressions of devotion repeated over decades. The spire retains the essence of attention, practice, and reverence, replaying it in ways perceptible to those who enter after dark. The experience is cumulative. The longer one remains, the more intense the chanting feels. Shadows move more deliberately. Kneeling figures appear more numerous. Silence itself becomes thicker, punctuated only by ritualized sound and motion. Time stretches, blending minutes and hours into a continuous present dominated by presence rather than passage. By dawn, the spire returns to ordinary perception. Shadows settle. Chanting fades entirely. Kneeling figures vanish. Candlelight disappears with morning sun, leaving the halls illuminated only by natural light. The air loses its oppressive weight. Visitors walking through experience the building as historical and quiet once again. The extraordinary events of the night leaving memory but no trace. Those who leave at sunrise carry the experience internally. They recall the weight of silence, the pattern of chanting, the deliberate movement of shadows, and the endless devotion at the altar. The spire's presence lingers beyond the building, shaping perception and memory. St. Michaela's silent spire endures as a space of history, ritual, and reflection. By day, it is open, welcoming, and calm. By night, it reveals another layer, a structure alive with memory, repetition, and observation. Visitors witness echoes of devotion, the rhythm of practice, and the enduring impression of centuries of attention, all under the quiet authority of the towering spire. Here, in the night, silence is never empty. It carries memory. It carries rhythm. It carries watchers who kneel endlessly at the altar, unseen but profoundly present, beneath the silent spire. Gracewood Parish rises at the edge of a quiet town, its stone walls weathered and worn by decades of exposure. The roof is intact but darkened with moss and age. Windows, once clear and vibrant with stained glass, are cracked or clouded, reflecting the sunlight in fractured patterns. By day, the church looks like any other abandoned structure, still, heavy, silent. Its gravestones lean at odd angles, and vines creep up the sides, intertwining with the stone in slow, persistent growth. At night, the building changes. The wind shifts differently here, carrying sounds from the surrounding fields and streets. Carrying sounds from the surrounding fields and streets in unusual ways. Darkness settles around the spire, creating shadows that stretch across the ground and mingle with the uneven gravestones. The air grows colder, denser, pressing lightly against the skin of anyone approaching. The usual calm of abandonment feels replaced with awareness, as though the building itself is listening. The first thing many visitors notice are the bells. Faint at first, the sound carries from the bell tower above. A single note, soft and pure, followed by another, echoing through the nave and down the long aisles. The tone is unmistakably that of a bell, yet no one has rung it. Outside, the tower remains empty, silent, and abandoned. The notes repeat with irregular intervals, sometimes one, sometimes several, fading into the night before beginning again. Windows reflect more than the faint moonlight. When visitors glance at the glass, they sometimes see the suggestion of faces. Shadows shaped like human features, full of presence but impossible to place. They do not move in unison, and no visitor ever sees more than a fleeting glimpse. A blink or turn of the head dissolves the image, leaving only the dark interior and the faint shimmer of reflected glass. Stepping inside the church often triggers a sudden reaction. The air is cooler than outside, damp with the scent of old wood and stone. Visitors feel a light pressure against the chest, a pull of awareness that makes muscles tighten and breathing shallow. The moment is subtle at first, then grows until an instinctive need to leave emerges. It is not fear in the conventional sense, but a force that urging the visitor to retreat before exploring too far. Sounds within the church compound the effect. Footsteps echo against the wooden floors, though no one moves above or beside the visitor. The sound is irregular, soft, sometimes hesitant, as if steps are following or circling without origin. The pattern does not match the visitor's own pace, yet it never fully disappears. Other noises, creaks, whispers of air shifting through cracks, soft taps from pews add to the sense that the building itself is alive, aware, attentive. Reflections shift subtly as the visitor moves. Figures appear just beyond recognition. Outlines and shapes that vanish with a change in perspective. Even when the observer stops, the presence lingers in the glass. Light behaves oddly near the windows, catching in a way that accentuates shadowed forms without revealing detail. Some report a faint smell of incense or candle smoke. It drifts through the nave and chancel despite no source, lingering in corners, near the altar, and along the aisles. The pews and altar amplify the feeling of observation. Each surface holds the weight of emptiness yet seems capable of scrutiny. Sitting or standing near them heightens the awareness of movement within the air, of space that seems occupied yet visually empty. Shadows gather in corners, suggesting motion without form, presence without body. As midnight approaches, the experience intensifies. Bells ring more distinctly, sharper and louder, echoing with clarity through the nave. Windows reflect more pronounced figures. The air grows colder, each breath more visible, forming mist that hangs and drifts slowly. The air grows colder, each breath more visible, forming mist that hangs and drifts slowly. Every step, every slight movement feels heavier, observed. Every step, every slight movement feels heavier, observed. The instinct to leave becomes harder to resist. The instinct to leave becomes harder to resist. Visitors who linger too long notice an almost rhythmic pattern. The sound of bells, the subtle shifts in reflections, the whisper of steps all move in cycles that repeat without exact predictability. Time feels altered, minutes stretching unnaturally. Awareness sharpens, focusing on small details, the texture of stone, the movement of a curtain, the subtle sway of a cross. By dawn, Gracewood Parish returns to its daytime state. The bells no longer sound. The windows reflect only sunlight and empty pews. The air feels lighter, warmer. Footsteps echo normally on wood. The faint scent disappears with the rising sun. Visitors often question whether they experienced the phenomena at all. Locals speak of the church cautiously. They warn of its presence after dark, the sounds and reflections that cannot be explained. Some say it is a place that holds memories, both sacred and lingering, a space where the past persists in subtle, perceptible ways. Others suggest the building is more aware than its appearance allows, responding to attention and presence rather than ignoring it. Visitors who have experienced the church remember long after leaving. They recall the sound of bells without movement. The shifting reflections of faces in windows. The pull on the chest that urged departure. The cold air and faint sense that marked the hours of observation. They remember how stillness became awareness, and how the church felt alive without life. Gracewood Parish stands unchanged. By day, it is a quiet, abandoned church, still and unremarkable. By night, it is a place that observes, reflects, and calls attention to its presence. Bells may ring. Windows may reveal impossible faces. The air may press lightly on the chest. The experience is subtle, but it is persistent, reminding visitors that some spaces do not forget, and some presences endure long after their congregation has gone. Holy Cross Ruined Church stands on a small rise, partially destroyed by fire decades ago. Its walls are blackened and cracked, roof beams collapsed or missing entirely. And stone arches remain upright in places, jagged against the sky. By day, sunlight filters through the gaps, casting irregular patterns across the scorched floor. The air carries a quiet weight, heavy with history and absence. It is faint at first, almost imagined, lingering in the air like memory rather than substance. As they move closer, the scent sharpens, subtle and persistent, clinging to clothing and hair. There is no fire nearby. The smell has no source beyond the walls themselves, as if the fire never fully left the space. Figures sometimes appear within the ruins. Silhouettes form against the remaining walls, tall and still, as if frozen in time. They stand within broken doorways or beneath collapsed arches, outlined by light filtering through gaps in the roof. When observed directly, the figures dissolve, leaving only empty space and shadow behind. Whispers follow the visitors. Soft, hurried voices drift through the air, carrying warnings rather than words. They are faint and indistinct, sometimes audible only in one ear, sometimes surrounding entirely. The tone is urgent, cautionary, compelling those present to reconsider their presence. The voices fade as soon as someone moves to locate them, leaving only silence punctuated by the occasional creak of stone or wood. The ruin itself exudes presence. Every beam, every charred stone, seems alive with the memory of what once existed. Footsteps echo differently here, uneven and deep, as if the walls themselves shift subtly in response. Shadows move at the edges of vision, dancing where sunlight or moonlight falls on uneven surfaces. A chill often travels up the spine, even on warm days. Hands may tingle or sweat without explanation. Heart rates rise subtly, and muscles tense instinctively. The closer someone moves to the figures or the center of the ruin, the heavier the sensation becomes. As though the air itself carries weight. The effect is cumulative. Walking through the ruined nave, lingering beneath an arch, or standing in the partially destroyed bell tower amplifies awareness. Sounds are distorted. Footsteps echo unexpectedly. Voices from outside may seem closer or warped. The environment encourages caution and attentiveness without overt threat. The fire that destroyed part of the church left more than physical damage. Local accounts describe a day of sudden heat, smoke, and chaos. Clergy and townspeople escaped, but some perished. Objects that survived the blaze became central to local storiesa. Books blackened but readable, pews twisted yet upright, crosses warped but intact. These remnants are said to carry memory, embedding the space with sensation and presence. The silhouettes are tied to that memory. Observers describe figures frozen in acciona, hands raised, heads turned, one kneeling, another standing with a cross in hand. Whispers correspond to these forms. Warnings to leave often rise near areas where silhouettes are most vivid. The tone is not malicious but insistent, a voice of caution embedded within the ruin itself. Those who listen too long feel tension building, as if time slows and perception narrows to the space between the observer and the figures. Visitors who heed the warnings often find relief. Stepping back toward the entrance, moving out of the nave, or leaving the ruins entirely reduces the intensity. The smell of smoke fades slightly. Shadows recede to ordinary darkness. The figures vanish from sight. The whispers die down, leaving only natural sounds that wind through broken windows, distant wildlife, and the occasional crack of wood or stone settling. Those who linger risk sensory overload. Prolonged attention to the figures and whispers can leave a lasting impression. Heart rate remains elevated, awareness heightens, and the perception of the ruin grows larger than it physically is. Time becomes difficult to judge. Minutes stretch unnaturally. And the boundary between present and memory blurs. Despite the intensity, the ruins are physically safe. Stone and timber are stable enough for visitors to move freely. There are no direct threats, no moving objects, no contact from the figures. The experience is largely psychological and emotional, a reminder of absence, memory, and lingering presence. By day, the ruin appears ordinary. Charred walls and collapsed beams stand under sunlight. The smell of smoke is faint, almost imaginary. Shadows fall predictably. Footsteps sound normal. The impression of figures and whispers fades for casual observers. At night, the effect intensifies. Moonlight entering through broken windows and gaps in the roof casts deeper shadows. The air feels heavier. Figures appear more distinct. Whispers rise more clearly, compelling visitors to notice, to feel, and often to retreat. Holy Cross ruined church remains a place of reflection and caution. It tells a story of fire, loss, and memory preserved in stone and timber. The silhouettes, the whispers, and the faint scent of smoke serve as markers of history embedded in space. Visitors who approach carefully experience both the weight of the past and the subtle reminder that some moments linger far beyond their physical end. Those who leave the ruins carry the memory with them. The scent, the whispering voices, the fleeting silhouettes remain in thought. A quiet echo of the church's history. Holy Cross ruined church stands unchanged by time. Partially destroyed yet vividly alive in memory. Awaiting the next visitor to feel the weight of what remains. St. John's Crossing stands quietly near the riverbank, a modest stone church surrounded by willows and low, misted grass. During the day, it appears serene and unassuming. Sunlight reflects off the river, and the gentle rustle of leaves accompanies the distant hum of the town. Visitors notice the simplicity of the building, its small steeple, and the worn cobblestones leading to heavy wooden doors. The air carries the faint scent of water and aged wood, giving the impression of stability and calm. The river's surface darkens under fading light, but remains still, almost unnaturally so. A thin mist begins to creep along the banks, brushing over grass and stone, curling around the church walls. The fog grows slowly, quietly, until the steeple appears half hidden in silver haze. The ordinary shapes of the churchyard become distorted, softened by the veil of night and moisture. After sunset, the atmosphere inside the church changes. The interior seems cooler and heavier. Each step along the aisle echoes unnaturally, carrying farther than expected. Visitors immediately sense that the space has become more than it appears, that it is listening. Soft sounds begin to emerge. Water lapping, steady and measured, drifts into the space. The river outside appears still, its surface calm and unbroken. Yet the sound continues, gentle at first, then growing subtly in presence and intensity. Visitors pause, trying to reconcile the quiet river with the unmistakable sensation of movement. Each lapping sound carries weight, as if the church itself resonates with unseen tides. The shapes appear elongated at first, stretching across the floor with the moonlight. Slowly, they take on more defined forms. Figures kneel, rise, or move with quiet deliberation, yet their edges remain hazy, blurred by the mist and dim interior. The shadows do not correspond precisely to any visitor or source of light, moving with a rhythm all their own. Those who approach feel a subtle pressure. The sensation is not forceful, but perceptible, an almost tangible acknowledgement of presence. It is as if unseen eyes track each movement, attentive but not aggressive. Visitors often report goosebumps, a tightening in the chest, and a sense of being observed, though no one is visible. The experience intensifies with time. The lapping of water continues, echoing slightly within the stone walls. The shadows extend farther, shifting in ways that suggest deliberate movement across the pews. A kneeling shape may tilt forward, only to vanish when approached. The repetition of these events produces a rhythmic tension, filling the space with energy without sound, except for the quiet resonance of water and occasional creak of wood beneath imagined weight. Visitors describe a growing awareness of the building itself. Every surface seems sensitive to attention. Light reflects off polished wood differently than expected. Stained glass panes catch moonlight in shifting patterns. The fog outside thickens and curls through open windows, wrapping the interior in a thin, almost living veil. It becomes difficult to distinguish the ordinary from the extraordinary. The sensation of unseen observers remains constant. Eyes seem to follow along aisles, across floors, and into corners. The perception is subtle, conveyed not through motion but through the air itself, an intangible presence pressing lightly against the senses. Each movement elicits heightened awareness, though there is never a direct threat. Some visitors pause at the altar. The space feels charged, as if holding the accumulated attention and prayers of centuries. Shadows cluster near the pews and altar, bowing and shifting. The sound of water grows softer, almost rhythmic, matching the observer's own heartbeat. Time seems to slow, minutes stretching without clear reference to clocks or watches. Local stories explain part of the phenomenon. And shadows appeared longer than the light should allow. Natural explanations are sometimes suggested. Fog can distort light and shadow. Water can carry sound unusually across terrain. Stone and wood can amplify echoes. The mind often fills gaps with imagination, especially when isolated in a quiet, partially lit environment. Yet these explanations do not fully satisfy those who witness the chapel at night. The water's sound continues even when the river is calm. Shadows move independently of light sources. The sensation of being observed is consistent and deliberate. Each visit produces similar experiences, suggesting patterns that go beyond ordinary natural phenomena. By morning, St. Jonah's Crossing appears ordinary again. Sunlight illuminates stone walls and pews. Shadows shrink to ordinary length. The fog lifts from the river. The lapping sound disappears. Visitors arriving in daylight find only the calm river and empty churchyard. The space seems inert, untouched by the mysteries of the night. But for those who have experienced it, the memory endures. They recall shadows kneeling in the pews, water lapping without cause, and the pressing awareness of unseen eyes. The church is not threatening, yet it carries weight, echoing history, devotion, and the subtle presence of something beyond ordinary perception. Each evening, when fog creeps across the river and darkness falls, water laps, shadows shift, and the building seems to observe quietly. A guardian of memory and presence. Visitors feel its subtle guidance, its attentive silence. And the gentle pull of history that persists, never ending, quietly waiting for those who dare to enter after sunset. Old St. Mary's stands solemnly at the edge of the town, its stone walls weathered by centuries of wind and rain. By day, the church appears quiet and reverent, a place of calm reflection. Sunlight filters through stained glass, casting soft patterns across the worn wooden pews. Visitors move through the nave, noticing the heavy doors, the high ceilings, and the lingering scent of aged wood and waxed stone. Beneath the main floor lie long crypts. Stone corridors stretch below the nave, narrow and silent, holding centuries of history. The air here is cool, carrying the faint mustiness of aged earth and carved stone. Visitors report drafts that seem to move independently of windows or doors, brushing along shoulders and across the floor. The air itself feels aware, shifting without visible cause. Low moaning sounds emerge from the crypts. They are not loud, yet they resonate through the stone walls and floors, echoing faintly into the nave above. The origin is indistinct, the sounds rising and falling like a distant lament. Each note seems carefully placed, timed with the rhythm of steps taken on the upper floor. Stairways lead to the crypts, narrow and worn. Each step carries the weight of centuries. Shadows stretch along walls, bending with candlelight or stray moonlight filtering through narrow openings. Figures occasionally appear at the edges of perception, emerging briefly from stairways or corners. They are indistinct, fleeting, human in shape but never fully solid. The figures do not speak. They move with intent yet remain silent. Some stand still for a moment, seeming to observe, then vanish as quickly as they appeared. Their presence is subtle but unmistakable, creating awareness without confrontation. Candles respond to the space. Flames ignite suddenly without hands or matches, burning softly for a few moments before dimming or extinguishing on their own. The movement of light adds a living quality to the shadows, illuminating portions of stone walls, crypt doors, and corridors briefly before leaving them in dim gray. The crypts feel alive. Stone walls absorb sound and presence, yet return faint echoes to anyone moving through the space. Time moves differently here. Minutes stretch. Steps that seem brief take longer than expected. Attention focuses on small details of the flicker of a candle, the shift of a shadow, the resonance of a moana rather than linear movement through the space. Visitors often pause. They listen. They watch. The crypts and nave create a rhythm of anticipation and observation, an environment where awareness heightens with each step. The moaning rises as footsteps approach, then fades when attention shifts elsewhere. Candles flare when stillness holds too long, illuminating hidden carvings or corners before returning to darkness. Descending into the deepest corridors brings a change in temperature. The air feels heavier, colder, closer to the earth itself. Breathing becomes more noticeable, echoing off walls and floors. Shadows appear denser, darker, and more defined, moving with the impression of life even in the absence of motion. Returning to the main nave, visitors notice small alterations. Pews may seem shifted slightly. Candles that were extinguished appear lit again. Shadows linger at the periphery, suggesting that the crypts below still influence the space above. Movement is implied rather than seen, hinting at continued activity in unseen areas. The church demands attention. Every sound, every flicker of light, every subtle draft carries meaning. The space does not threaten but observes, shaping perception through awareness rather than force. Visitors feel their senses heighten, tracking movement and presence without ever fully understanding its origin. When leaving, the experience remains vivid. Visitors recall the moaning that traveled through stone, the fleeting figures on stairways, and the candles that ignited and extinguished themselves. Steps feel heavier in memory than in reality. Shadows seem to linger just beyond vision. Time, once linear, appears altered. Locals speak of old St. Maria's with reverence. They describe centuries of worship, life, and death preserved in stone and air. They acknowledge the crypts beneath and the presence that seems to persist after dark. Stories tell of moments when visitors encounter what cannot be explained, leaving the building both ordinary and extraordinary simultaneously. Old St. Maria's continues its quiet vigil. By day, it welcomes parishioners and tourists alike. By night, it becomes a place where the crypts beneath influence perception, where shadows move with intent, and where candlelight acts as a messenger between seen and unseen. The church does not chase visitors. It observes, it shapes, and it communicates in subtle ways. Those who enter after dusk feel the weight of centuries. The whispers of the stone. And the faint brush of unseen hands. And when dawn returns light to the nave, the memory of the night lingers. A reminder that some spaces are alive with presence long after silence falls. Redeemer's Hollow stands at the edge of a quiet town, its steeple reaching skyward and casting long shadows across the surrounding streets. By day, the church appears solemn and still. Sunlight filters through stained glass, painting colored patterns across worn pews and stone floors. The air carries the faint scent of incense and aged wood, calm and familiar. Visitors entering during daylight feel the weight of history, the echo of centuries of devotion, yet nothing stirs beyond the ordinary. As night falls, the church transforms. Shadows deepen along aisles and staircases. The scent of candle wax grows stronger, mingling with cool night air that slips through cracks in the doors and windows. Silence dominates the space, yet it is thick and heavy, as though the building itself is holding its breath. Every footstep, every movement resonates farther than expected, carrying with it an uncanny awareness of presence. Footsteps emerge without visible origin. They ascend the wooden stairs in the bell tower with deliberate weight. Each step lands clearly, followed by another in precise rhythm. Then they descend, echoing back along corridors that appear empty. The motion is steady and unhurried, giving the impression of purpose without haste. The sound fills the church without revealing the source, grounding visitors in the sensation of movement within otherwise still space. Ghostly hymns follow the steps. Low and resonant, the voices carry through the vaulted ceilings. They sing in harmony, forming melodies that seem familiar yet remain unrecognizable. Words do not fully resolve, syllables bending in unexpected patterns. The hymns ebb and flow with the footsteps, rising and fading in synchrony with unseen motion. Listening closely, one senses the chant is deliberate, organized, and ritualistic, echoing across nave and transept without visible origin. Dim and shapeless, they shift between columns, around corners, and along staircases. Observers catch glimpses of upright forms, their outlines human but blurred at the edges. They do not acknowledge attention, nor do they interact. Their motion is measured, looping in repetitive paths that trace familiar routes through the building. At the altar, figures kneel and guide. Spectral ministers appear, robes flowing as if caught in a silent breeze. They move gracefully along the sanctuary, gesturing toward invisible congregations. Hands lift in blessing, fingers trace patterns in the air, eyes gaze outward yet see nothing in the material space. The effect is not threatening but commanding, a presence both comforting and unnerving, structured in form yet unbound by matter. The entire church hums with quiet energy. Every sound resonates against stone walls. Every shadow reacts subtly to attention. The footsteps and hymns persist in cycles, blending with the natural acoustics of the building to create a layered soundscape. Observers feel drawn into the rhythm, a sense of participation without action. Even when standing still, the church communicates presence through sound, motion, and the weight of memory embedded in the space. Visitors describe a growing awareness of observation. It is not fear that dominates, but an acute sense of being watched. Shadows at the edges of vision seem purposeful. The ministers at the altar are attentive to movement, gesturing toward spaces unseen. The sensation is constant, pressing gently without aggression, a quiet insistence that the church is alive with attention. Light behaves strangely within the building. Candle flames flicker in patterns inconsistent with air movement. Reflections in polished wood and glass show motion absent from the material world. Stained glass filters shapes into forms that suggest figures in motion along the walls or across pews. Light and shadow work in tandem to create the illusion of presence while reinforcing the perception of depth and ritual. The experience intensifies as night deepens. Footsteps accelerate slightly, hymn layers grow more complex, and shadows move with increased frequency. Observers feel time stretch, moments blending as perception focuses entirely on sound and motion. The church becomes both expansive and intimate, a space larger than its physical dimensions, filled with unseen devotion. Local accounts suggest the building retains memory. Redeemer's Hollow has stood for centuries, hosting congregations, ceremonies, and rituals. Clergy and laity moved in structured patterns across floors and staircases, observing practices repeated for generations. Minister's Guide. These echoes do not demand interaction, but they respond subtly to observation, drawing attention and focus. The rituals repeat endlessly, a cycle of memory and presence that persists beyond corporeal existence. By dawn, Redeemer's Hollow returns to ordinary perception. Footsteps vanish. Hymns fade. Shadows settle into corners. The ministers at the altar disappear entirely, leaving only the silent stone, wood, and glass. Light pours through windows, revealing the building as it always has been, as still, solemn, and unchanging. Those who witnessed the church at night carry the experience with them. They remember the rhythmic ascent of footsteps, the layered hymns, the subtle motion of shadows, and the attentive presence of spectral ministers. They leave with the sense that devotion and ritual persist beyond the boundaries of time, echoing in the architecture itself. Redeemer's Hollow endures as a space of faith, memory, and presence. By day, it is calm and reflective. By night, it reveals another layer, alive with sound, motion, and unseen guidance. A place where echoes of centuries of devotion continue to walk the halls, sing the hymns, and kneel endlessly at the altar. St. Peter's Watch rises above a quiet town square, its tall bell tower piercing the sky like a sentinel over the streets below. By day, the tower appears unremarkable, a relic of centuries past, its stone weathered by wind and sun. Shadows fall across the square, shifting slowly as clouds drift overhead. The bells hang silent, heavy and still, waiting for the hands of time to move once more. As evening approaches, the town grows still. The square empties. Doors close with soft clicks. Footsteps echo against the cobblestones long after their owners have disappeared. A faint chill drifts through the streets, carrying the scent of old stone and distant rain. The air feels heavier here, as if the tower itself presses down upon the square, observing without movement. Visitors often notice the first signs at the base of the tower. Figures appear briefly at the entrance, tall and human in shape. They do not speak. They do not gesture. They remain perfectly still for a heartbeat, then vanish without trace. The doorway remains empty, the stone intact, leaving only the memory of motion where none should exist. The tower itself seems alive at night. Shadows shift near the upper windows. They are not random, nor the simple play of light from street lamps. They move with purpose, sliding behind panes of glass, disappearing into corners and then returning. The motion is subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but repeated observation makes it impossible to ignore. Visitors who glance upward feel eyes watching, though no face is visible. Vibrations begin to ripple through the square. The ground hums lightly beneath feet, not enough to shake the cobblestones, but sufficient to notice. The effect intensifies when standing close to the entrance. Each step forward makes the vibrations sharper, the sense of presence heavier. The bells occasionally respond without cause. At moments when the square is empty, a faint toll echoes from the tower. The sound carries without pattern, sometimes a single chime, sometimes 3 in sequence. No rope moves. No wind presses the clapper. The tone fades slowly, leaving only the memory of resonance vibrating through the chest and up into the ears. They stretch and shift with the sound, moving in synchrony with the echoes. The shapes are human-like but featureless, defined only by darkness and the subtle gleam of reflected moonlight. Observers feel drawn to watch, unable to turn away, yet hesitant to move closer. The stairs inside the tower remain hidden, the entrance dark and uninviting. The figures at the entrance sometimes reappear. They step briefly into view, silhouetted against the doorway, their outlines sharp against the dim interior light. The instant attention focuses on them, they vanish. No footsteps follow. No sound accompanies the motion. Only the slight lingering pressure of awareness, as if the presence remains even after the form is gone. Wind carries whispers across the square. Not voices, but low, indistinct murmurs that shift and fade. They mingle with the echo of footsteps on cobblestones, with the faint ringing of bells, and with the subtle vibration beneath. Each sound amplifies the others, creating a sense of rhythm, a pulse that fills the space without explanation. Visitors report a sense of temporal distortion. Minutes stretch longer than expected. Shadows move in unexpected ways. Sounds arrive slightly early or late. Awareness narrows to the tower, the doorway, and the windows. The square feels smaller and larger at once, compressed by focus yet stretched by subtle shifts in perception. The effect is not overtly frightening, but it is insistent. It compels attention and focus, making every observer acutely aware of the environment. Each step, each glance upward, each movement is measured, amplified by the awareness of eyes that cannot be seen. The tower dominates perception, guiding attention through sight, sound, and subtle physical sensation. As night deepens, the tower remains vigilant. Shadows stretch farther along the upper windows. The vibrations intensify, pulsing in time with faint tolls that occur without reason. Figures at the doorway may appear again, always brief, always untraceable. Movement in the square becomes secondary to the rhythm of observation, the cycle of presence that dominates the senses. The bells hang silent. Windows reflect only sunlight. Shadows align naturally with morning light. The vibrations fade, leaving only the memory of their presence. Visitors feel the residual awareness of something watching, something responsive, but unseen. By dawn, St. Peter's watch returns to ordinary stillness. The bells hang silent. Windows reflect only sunlight. Shadows align naturally with morning light. The vibrations fade, leaving only the memory of their presence. Visitors feel the residual awareness of something watching, something responsive, but unseen. By dawn, St. Peter's watch returns to ordinary stillness. The bells hang silent. Windows reflect only sunlight. Shadows align naturally with morning light. The vibrations fade, leaving only the memory of their presence. Visitors feel the residual awareness of something watching, something responsive, but unseen. By dawn, St. Peter's watch returns to ordinary stillness. The bells hang silent. Windows reflect only sunlight. Shadows align naturally with morning light. The vibrations fade, leaving only the memory of their presence. Visitors feel the residual awareness of something watching, something responsive, but unseen. By dawn, St. Peter's watch returns to ordinary stillness. The bells hang silent. Windows reflect only sunlight. Shadows align naturally with morning light. The vibrations fade, leaving only the memory of their presence. Visitors feel the residual awareness of something watching, something responsive, but unseen. By dawn, St. Peter's watch returns to ordinary stillness. The bells hang silent. Windows reflect only sunlight. Shadows align naturally with morning light. The vibrations fade, leaving only the memory of their presence. Visitors feel the residual awareness of something watching, something responsive, but unseen. By dawn, St. Peter's watch returns to ordinary stillness. The bells hang silent. Windows reflect only sunlight. Shadows align naturally with morning light. The vibrations fade, leaving only the memory of their presence. Visitors feel the residual awareness of something watching, something responsive, but unseen. By dawn, St. Peter's watch returns to ordinary stillness. The bells hang silent. Windows reflect only sunlight. Shadows align naturally with morning light. The vibrations fade, leaving only the memory of their presence. Visitors feel the residual awareness of something watching, something responsive, but unseen. By dawn, St. Peter's watch returns to ordinary stillness. The bells hang silent. Windows reflect only sunlight. Shadows align naturally with morning light. The vibrations fade, leaving only the memory of their presence. Visitors feel the residual awareness of something watching, something responsive, but unseen. By dawn, St. Peter's watch returns to ordinary stillness. The bells hang silent. Locals speak cautiously of the tower. They say it has always observed, quietly, without malice, recording the movements of those below. They warn that after dark, it becomes more than stone and bell. It becomes a space that enforces attention, shaping perception, guiding awareness toward the windows and doorway in subtle, insistent ways. Visitors who experience it remember. They recall the brief figures at the entrance. The shadows moving in the upper windows. The vibrations beneath their feet. The faint toll of bells with no source. The compulsion to watch and observe. The brief figures at the entrance. The shadows moving in the upper windows. The vibrations beneath their feet. The faint toll of bells with no source. The compulsion to watch and observe. St. Peter's watch remains standing. Tall, silent, and observant. By day, a relic. By night, a presence. Figures may appear. Shadows may shift. Vibrations may hum. And those who linger long enough understand that the tower watches not only with eyes, but with rhythm, echo, and subtle insistence, marking every step of those who cross the square below. Salem Old Chapel stands quietly at the end of a narrow alley, its stone walls weathered and darkened by centuries of rain and wind. By day, it looks small and unassuming, with a heavy wooden door, narrow windows, and a simple bell tower rising above. The street around it is often empty, cobblestones worn smooth, echoing footsteps of those who pass by. Even in daylight, the chapel carries an unusual stillness. Air inside feels cooler than outside, carrying the faint scent of old wood and wax. Light filters unevenly through the narrow windows, casting faint patterns across the floor. Visitors often pause at the threshold, sensing the quiet weight of the place, as if it remembers every person who has entered before them. At night, the atmosphere shifts. Silence deepens until it feels almost oppressive. Shadows stretch across the floor, walls, and ceiling, forming shapes that play tricks on the mind. Shadows stretch across the floor, walls, and ceiling, forming shapes that play tricks on the mind. Footsteps echo strangely, sometimes behind a visitor when none are present. Shadows stretch across the floor, walls, and ceiling, forming shapes that play tricks on the mind. Footsteps echo strangely, sometimes behind a visitor when none are present. The air becomes thick, heavy with anticipation, pressing lightly against skin and slowing breath. Shadows stretch across the floor, walls, and ceiling, forming shapes that play tricks on the mind. Footsteps echo strangely, sometimes behind a visitor when none are present. The air becomes thick, heavy with anticipation, pressing lightly against skin and slowing breath. Faint screaming can be heard. It rises softly, like a child calling from a distance, growing slightly louder, then fading into nothing. The sound is intermittent, impossible to locate precisely, echoing through the nave and into the alley outside. Visitors often freeze, listening, unsure whether it comes from inside the chapel or from memory itself. Near the altar, ghostly figures appear. Children move in fleeting patterns, playing quietly yet distinctly. Their movements are subtle, sometimes glimpsed out of the corner of an eye, sometimes standing clearly in the glow of moonlight through broken panes. The children never interact. They do not speak directly to visitors, and no footsteps accompany their motion. Attempting to approach them often results in the figures disappearing, only to reappear moments later, closer to the altar or standing in a different position entirely. The children reappear moments later, closer to the altar or standing in a different position entirely. Doors behave strangely. Visitors who enter freely sometimes find the entrance locked behind them without any apparent mechanism. Keys and handles respond as if sealed by unseen hands. Turning to look behind reveals no evidence of tampering. The chapel itself seems to have become a vessel for containment, holding those inside within its memory. The space responds to attention. Focusing on one area heightens the experience. Shadows shift. Whispers rise faintly from walls. The sound of footsteps or laughter becomes more distinct, more immediate. Moving toward another point in the chapel often reduces intensity, yet the sense of being watched persists, enveloping the visitor completely. Temperature changes are subtle but persistent. A chill flows along the stone floor, creeping upward through clothing. Hands grow cold. Breath becomes visible in the air, even on warmer nights. The effect is uneven, intensifying near the altar and along the walls, fading slightly in corners away from direct observation. The chapel feels alive in memory. Every object, every shadow, seems to retain the weight of past presence. Benches, candles, and the altar itself echo events that occurred long ago. The place remembers movement, emotion, and intent, replaying them in subtle, continuous ways for those sensitive to its history. Visitors report feelings of pressure in the chest. It is not panic, but a weight of anticipation, an urging to move carefully and with awareness. The sensation intensifies when lingering near the center of the chapel, as though the space itself measures attention and intention. Whispers emerge unpredictably. They are brief, disjointed phrases that fade before forming coherent meaning. The interplay of sight, sound, and touch shapes the experience. Moonlight falling across worn stone reveals figures that vanish when observed directly. Whispers rise near walls that have long stood untouched. The chill moves with each step, affecting balance and perception. Visitors cannot rely on familiar sensory feedback, creating a heightened awareness of presence and environment. Exiting the chapel restores normal perception gradually. Shadows settle into stillness. The air warms and light shifts to natural levels. The echo of laughter, the feel of pressure, the sense that someone or something observed every movement. Salem Old Chapel remains unchanged by day. It is a quiet stone building along a narrow alley, waiting for the next visitor to cross its threshold. Its walls stand solid, its doors closed or open, and its history preserved in shadow, whisper, and the faintest impression of footsteps along the stone floor. Figures play near the altar, faint screaming rises and falls, doors respond to unseen hands, and the chapel's presence weighs on those who enter. All Saints Abandoned stands quietly on a small hill, its stone walls weathered and worn. The windows are shattered or boarded, letting in streaks of pale light that illuminate dust swirling through the air. Outside, weeds grow through cracks in the pavement, and the surrounding grounds are uneven and forgotten. By day, the building appears desolate but harmless, a relic of faith and community long past. Shadows stretch across the exterior walls, lengthening unnaturally under the last light of the sun. After sunset, the first sounds emerge. Faint music drifts from within the building, rich and solemn. The instrument has long been dismantled or broken. Keys are missing, pipes bent or rusted, yet the sound persists. Visitors describe a harmony that seems impossible, played with deliberate, haunting precision. Those who enter notice shadows moving along the walls. The shapes are faint at first, forming subtle crosses and the outlines of kneeling figures. They appear and vanish almost rhythmically, shifting with the music that seems to flow independently of wind or structure. Walking through the nave, some report a physical sensation. A light tug on a sleeve, a brush along the arm, subtle enough to surprise but never harm. The feeling comes in rhythm with the movement of shadows and the organ's music, as though guiding attention or insisting on acknowledgement. Visitors instinctively look around, yet no one is visible. The church responds to presence. Movement of footsteps seems to influence the intensity of the music and the clarity of shadows. Stand still, and the music continues softly, shadows barely discernible. Step forward, and the organ grows louder, the shadows more defined. The interaction is subtle but deliberate, creating a sense of rhythm between observer and space. The interior itself contributes to the effect. Light from broken windows casts long, shifting lines across the nave. Dust motes float in the beams, catching the faint illumination and creating the impression of movement. Wooden pews groan softly under imagined weight. Air currents stir papers and fabric, amplifying the perception of activity. Every element of the building seems tuned to reinforce presence and reflection. Time behaves differently within these walls. Minutes stretch and compress unpredictably. A short walk from the entrance to the altar can feel prolonged, heavy with expectation. Sitting for a brief moment may seem like hours. Visitors often lose track of time entirely, absorbed in the combination of sound, shadow, and subtle physical sensation. Visitors often lose track of time entirely, absorbed in the combination of sound, shadow, and subtle physical sensation. All Saints Abandoned was once a thriving church, filled with the prayers and presence of hundreds over decades. Services, weddings, and funerals left impressions in the air, moments of human devotion layered upon one another. When the building fell into disuse, the echoes of these events may have remained, replaying in subtle ways that only emerge under specific conditions. Natural explanations exist. Wind passing through broken windows can produce low hums. Dust and sunlight can create patterns resembling human forms. Psychological expectation can heighten sensitivity to touch and sound. Abandoned structures carry unique acoustics that distort perception. Yet these explanations do not fully account for the consistency. The music persists in precise harmony. Shadows move in defined gestures, independent of observers. Tugging sensations occur without wind or physical contact. Visitors report similar experiences across nights and decades, suggesting that something more than chance is at work. The experience leaves a lasting impression. Visitors often emerge with a heightened awareness of the space they just occupied. The combination of visual, auditory, and tactile stimuli creates a sense of reverence, nostalgia, and quiet unease. The building is not malevolent. It does not chase or attack. It communicates through presence, memory, and subtle interaction. By day, All Saints Abandoned appears inert. Light illuminates broken windows, faded stone, and empty pews. Shadows fall where expected. The music is gone. Visitors who return during daylight often doubt what they experienced at night, though memory of it remains vivid and unsettling. As night returns, the chapel awakens once more. Organ music plays without instrument. Unseen hands brush gently at observers. Dust swirls in the light of broken windows, catching and reflecting in rhythm with the movement within. Time seems suspended. All Saints Abandoned does not demand fear. It preserves echoes, memories, and moments of devotion. It invites reflection and attention, allowing visitors to feel a connection to the countless prayers, gestures, and presences that have passed through. For a brief time each night, the building remembers and shares what remains, quietly, deliberately, and profoundly. St. Paula's Echo Church rises quietly among narrow streets and aged stone buildings, its tall spire visible against the late afternoon sky. By day, the church feels stable and familiar. Sunlight streams through stained glass, painting colors across the wooden pews. Visitors walk the aisles with a sense of calm, noticing the carved details of the pulpit, the smooth stone walls, and the scent of old wood and polished floors. As evening arrives, the atmosphere changes. Shadows lengthen across the nave, and the light from lamps and candles softens into flickering amber. The walls, solid and cold, seem to grow in presence. Every sound carries farther than expected, bouncing and twisting in ways that make the space feel larger, deeper, and more layered than during daylight. The church becomes aware of the movement within it. Visitors first notice the echoes. Footsteps resonate, not always matching the ones being made. Each step multiplies, reverberating in patterns that suggest others walking beside them, just out of sight. The words are recognizable yet incomplete, leaving only fragments that tease meaning. Some pause to listen. The echoes seem to respond to attention. They grow slightly louder when observed and fall silent when ignored. Figures begin to appear along the aisles. They are indistinct at first, blurred by low light and shadow. Some seem to kneel briefly in empty spaces, others stand with heads bowed, observing the church silently. Their presence is fleeting. They vanish before reaching the end of the aisle or stepping into the light. The movement is deliberate and precise. Figures do not rush. Yet awareness of them is immediate and undeniable. The walls carry each footfall, each shuffle of a figure's robe, amplifying presence without revealing form. Sounds of old sermons continue to echo. The fragments rise and fall like faint tides of sound, never complete, never fully intelligible. A visitor moving through the aisles may hear words meant for someone else, delivered with authority and urgency, then fading into silence as the stone absorbs them. The effect creates a layered perception of time, as though past moments are overlaid on the present. Visitors sometimes feel compelled to follow the figures. Steps match rhythm with movement along the pews. The shadows guide without instruction. Each turn and pause is gentle, drawing attention forward while maintaining the illusion of distance. Yet approaching closely rarely reveals anything more than a slight distortion of light and air. Footsteps echo more distinctly. Voices grow sharper in fragments. Shadows lengthen and blend with the shapes of pews and columns. The atmosphere thickens with quiet awareness, enveloping each visitor in layers of past and present. Minutes stretch and compress. Visitors lose track of sequences of events. Movement feels longer than it is, yet hours can seem to pass unnoticed. The echoes preserve both sound and experience, bending perception to match the rhythm of the building rather than any natural measure of time. Some visitors awaken to subtle changes. Pews are found slightly rearranged. Small items shift, suggesting deliberate action, yet nothing appears broken or disturbed. The effect is subtle but persistent, leaving the impression that the church itself participates in its own narrative. Lights from candles or lamps flicker in patterns. Flames ignite briefly, then extinguish, moving shadows along walls and columns. Each movement of light emphasizes presence and absence, creating paths and directions that are felt more than understood. Visitors eventually leave. When the doors close behind them, the echoes fade gradually, but the memory remains. The sound of footsteps that were not theirs, the fragments of sermons, the fleeting figures, and the rearranged pews linger in consciousness. Awareness of time, space, and presence feels subtly altered, a residue of the church's layered existence. Locals speak of St. Paula's Echo Church with reverence. They remember centuries of worship, events, and moments recorded in stone and wood. They recognize that certain nights allow the building to reveal its hidden rhythm, its ability to preserve sound and presence. The church exists simultaneously as a place of peace and as a living witness to its own history. St. Paula's Echo Church continues to stand. By day, it welcomes visitors in ordinary ways. By night, it transforms into a space where echoes carry memory, figures pass silently along aisles, and awareness of presence persists long after observation. The church does not act aggressively. It observes. It records. It preserves the resonance of centuries in every footstep, every whisper, and every flicker of light along its walls. Those who enter after dark leave changed. They carry the memory of echoes not their own, shadows moving gracefully through the nave, and a subtle rearrangement of pews. They understand, without being told, that some spaces are alive with history, perception, and presence. And that St. Paul's Echo Church remains patient, waiting, and fully aware within its quiet, hallowed walls. Christ Redeemed Chapel sits at the heart of the town square, its white stone walls and pointed steeple reflecting the sun during the day. By daylight, it appears serene and welcoming. Stained glass windows cast colors across polished floors, and wooden pews line the sanctuary in orderly rows. Visitors pass through calmly, hearing only the soft echo of footsteps and the occasional creak of doors. The chapel feels alive with history, a place shaped by generations of devotion and quiet reflection. Shadows stretch across the square and over the stone steps. Doors close with a soft finality, cutting off sound from the streets. The air cools, heavy with the scent of aged wood and candle wax. Silence dominates the space, yet it is thick and almost tactile, pressing gently against visitors who remain. Windows begin to glow. A faint light radiates from the panes, warm and steady, though no lamps or candles are lit inside. The glow illuminates the exterior, drawing attention to carved details and the spire above. Visitors hear them circling in measured rhythm. They ascend and descend stairs, shift along the aisles, and move around pews. The sound is clear and precise, echoing against stone and wood. Yet no one is visible. The rhythm is deliberate, neither hurried nor uncertain. As if the chapel itself maintains a patrol of unseen presence. Shadows appear behind pews. Forms move quietly, elongated by low light and the glow from windows. The combination of footsteps and shadow produces a surreal effect. Sound and movement occupy the space fully, creating a sense of activity without bodies. Observers feel the chapel respond to attention. Turning toward a shadow may make it fade slightly, yet it returns when focus drifts elsewhere. The steps continue in rhythm, repeating in loops that match the layout of the building. Light behaves strangely within the sanctuary. The windows glow with a warm intensity, reflecting along polished floors and wooden pews. Candle sconces appear dimly lit from certain angles, though inspection reveals none are burning. Stained glass casts moving patterns that shift in sync with shadowed figures, adding to the impression of life without origin. Visitors often describe a feeling of being observed. The sensation does not carry threat. It is subtle, pressing at the back of the neck and across the shoulders. Awareness sharpens. Even without seeing figures in the peripheral vision, one senses presence surrounding them. Moving through the chapel does not reduce the sensation. Standing still heightens it. The footsteps trace deliberate paths. They circle aisles, ascend platforms, move around corners, and descend quietly along the rear pews. The sound fills the chapel without becoming overwhelming, maintaining an ordered rhythm. Occasionally, the echoes seem to layer, producing the impression of multiple unseen walkers moving simultaneously through the sanctuary. Shadows gather near focal points. The altar and pulpit draw attention. Forms appear kneeling, standing, or gesturing toward invisible congregants. Their outlines suggest reverence, ritual, and repetition. They do not communicate with visitors, yet the presence they embody is profound. Observers feel guided by unseen patterns, aware that their attention is noted though never directly engaged. Local history explains part of the sensation. Christ Redeemed Chapel has served the town for generations, hosting ceremonies, prayers, and daily routines. Clergy and laity moved in structured paths across floors and stairways. The repetition of practice may have left impressions upon the building, echoes of devotion captured in architecture, stone, and wood. The chapel seems to preserve this devotion. Footsteps and shadows, light and reflection, form a continuous rhythm of presence. The activity does not escalate or threaten. It repeats, persistent and organized, marking ritual without requiring interaction. Observers feel included yet separate, part of a space alive with memory rather than physical bodies. As midnight approaches, the intensity peaks. Footsteps grow slightly more layered, shadows multiply along aisles and behind pews. The glow from windows appears brighter, stretching across floors and walls. The sensation of being watched becomes pronounced, focused yet calm. Time seems suspended, moments elongating as attention narrows on rhythm, light, and movement. By dawn, the chapel returns to ordinary perception. Shadows settle. Footsteps vanish. Window glow fades. Light pours in naturally from the rising sun. Polished floors and wooden pews appear unchanged. Observers feel the calm of morning, the sense of presence lingering only in memory. Visitors leave carrying the experience internally. They recall rhythmic steps circling aisles. Shadows moving in silent procession. Window light glowing without source. And the attentive presence surrounding them. The sensation is solemn and compelling, rooted in history yet beyond direct comprehension. Christ Redeemed Chapel endures as a space of devotion, memory, and perception. By day, it welcomes travelers and congregants. By night, it reveals another layer, alive with footsteps, shadowed forms, soft commands of ritual. And the glowing windows that mark a presence unseen yet undeniable. Visitors witness echoes of devotion, movement without origin, and a chapel quietly alive in the last hours of night. The church sits near old graveyards where headstones tilt at uneven angles and moss creeps across letters worn smooth by time. By day, the building appears solemn yet unremarkable, its windows reflecting sunlight in fractured patterns across the surrounding grass. The air carries a faint scent of earth and damp stone, ordinary enough to feel natural to those passing nearby. As evening falls, the atmosphere changes. Shadows stretch long across the churchyard. The wind slows, and the air grows heavy with stillness. The gravel paths that crisscross the graveyard seem to absorb sound rather than carry it. Each footstep crunches sharply, echoing off walls and through the empty corridors. The space takes on a quiet weight, a tangible presence that feels older than the building itself. Visitors often notice the chanting first. Soft, faint voices rise from outside the windows. The sound is rhythmic, steady, but impossible to place. Each syllable blends seamlessly with the evening air, creating an eerie harmony that threads through the graveyard and into the nave. The source cannot be located. The voices seem to come from the headstones themselves, yet no figures are immediately visible. Looking beyond the windows, some see movement. Figures kneel at headstones, bowed low, their forms dim and indistinct in the fading light. The shapes do not shift, speak, or wave. They remain solemn and still, as if engaged in some silent ritual. The moonlight outlines shoulders and bowed heads, yet faces are impossible to discern. The effect is subtle but immediate, creating a sense of presence that extends into the church itself. Inside, footsteps echo. Corridors that should be empty resonate with soft, deliberate steps. They move along the wooden floors, past pews and chapels, stopping briefly before continuing. Visitors may follow the sound, only to find the halls vacant. The noise does not correspond to their own movement, nor to any living person in sight. It comes and goes, fading in one direction and returning from another, creating a disorienting rhythm that heightens awareness. The weight of the building becomes palpable. Each step taken inside the church feels heavier than expected. Doors creak with subtle resistance. Light from lamps or candles bends strangely along the walls. The air is cool and dense, pressing lightly on skin and lungs. Visitors describe a sense of being observed, not by eyes, but by the very structure itself. As if the walls have retained memory from those long past. Chanting intensifies at certain moments. It grows clearer, louder, threading through arches and corridors. The voice is not threatening, but insistent, a sound that commands attention without words. It carries a cadence that mirrors the slow pulse of the building, creating the impression that the church itself is breathing in time with the voices. Figures in the graveyard respond subtly. They do not move toward the church, but appear slightly closer, or the angle shifts so that more of their form is visible through the windows. Shadows lengthen around them. The atmosphere thickens with anticipation. The combination of sound, presence, and perception creates a space where reality feels suspended, where distance is altered and the passage of time seems slowed. Visitors feel compelled to move carefully. Every footstep on the stone floors resonates through the hall. The walls seem to respond to motion, amplifying each echo. Pausing brings awareness of silence, a silence that is equally loud, filled with unseen observation. Breathing becomes more deliberate, conscious, as each inhale and exhale adds to the heightened perception of the space. The church communicates without words. It conveys its history through the sensation of weight, through sound and shadow. The faint chants and the kneeling figures become markers, guiding the visitor's attention, framing perception in subtle ways that insist on recognition and respect. Each movement is mirrored by the environment, each glance returned by an absence that feels deeply present. By midnight, the hollowed churchyard is fully transformed. The chanting is at its strongest. Shadows stretch across the windows. Figures kneel silently at every visible headstone. Footsteps continue along the corridors, measured and deliberate. The sensation of being watched, of moving through a space alive with memory, is undeniable. The air is cool and thick, carrying the echo of countless past rituals. By dawn, Providence Hollow returns to ordinary stillness. The graveyard appears quiet. The kneeling figures are gone. Footsteps vanish. The chanting ceases. Light softens across moss and stone. Visitors may question whether the experience was real or a trick of perception, yet the memory remains vivid, the awareness of unseen presence lingering long after leaving the churchyard. Locals speak of the church cautiously. They describe it as a place that remembers. They warn that Providence Hollow holds the echoes of centuries. That the sound of voices may call without origin. That shadows and weight mark the passage of all who enter. It is a space that responds to attention, to movement, to observation. Preserving presence even in apparent absence. Visitors leave altered. They recall the echoes, the kneeling figures, the sensation of observation, the weight of silence. Providence Hollow is more than stone and wood. It is a repository of memory, ritual, and presence. The church stands, observing silently, a reminder that some spaces retain the past and communicate it in ways beyond sight or sound, through the subtle impressions they leave on those who enter. St. Lucia's forgotten hall stretches long and narrow, its ceiling high and shadowed, the walls lined with aged wooden panels that have absorbed decades of silence. By day, sunlight filters through tall windows, casting pale strips across the worn floor. Dust motes drift lazily in the air, disturbed only by footsteps echoing along the hall. The space appears abandoned, yet carefully preserved, as if frozen in expectation of something that never returned. At night, the hall transforms. Shadows deepen until the far end seems swallowed in darkness. The familiar architecture becomes more imposing, walls stretching longer, corners sharper, the ceiling higher. Each step along the floor carries a different weight, echoing unevenly, as though the building itself bends sound to its own purpose. Visitors hear shuffling first. The sound is subtle, soft, yet undeniably human in quality. Footsteps move along the edges of the hall, sometimes on the far wall, sometimes close enough to startle. Whispering follows. Low voices drift along the length of the hall, rising and fading, crossing from side to side. Words are indistinct, almost incomprehensible, but carry tone and urgency. The whispers are not loud enough to alarm, yet they press on the mind, creating a sense of tension and anticipation. Visitors strain to locate the voices, only to find empty walls and vacant space. Figures appear along the walls. They pace slowly, ghost-like, silhouettes moving just within the range of vision. Those who remain still feel pressure. A cold weight settles on the back, spreading across shoulders and upper spine. It is not painful, but oppressive, a sensation that demands awareness. The chill deepens when attention focuses on the figures or the whispers. Moving forward slightly diminishes the feeling, but stopping strengthens it. The hall itself seems to respond to attention. When visitors glance at a figure, it may pause, shift, or vanish. Looking away often causes movement to resume, as if the hall maintains awareness of the observer, adjusting the experience based on perception rather than physical presence. Even without figures, the sound of walking on the wooden floor carries unevenly, resonating as if amplified by the shadows. Observers report feeling followed, though no one is present, their own pace mirrored in sound alone. Time stretches unnaturally. A few steps can feel longer than they should. Walking the full length of the hall may take minutes that feel like hours. Those who linger often lose track of intervals, the mind drawn into rhythm and repetition rather than counting seconds. The whispers are warnings or reminders, never commands. Visitors sense caution more than threat, an urging to move thoughtfully and respectfully within the space. The hall's architecture amplifies perception. High ceilings, long walls, and narrow corridors funnel sound and shadow. Each movement changes how light falls, how echoes return, and how the mind interprets presence. A simple glance can shift the apparent position of figures or the intensity of whispers. Visitors report the experience as physical and emotional. Chill runs down the spine, muscles tense subtly, and breathing becomes conscious. The mind becomes focused entirely on observation, absorbing every nuance of sound, shadow, and movement. A sense of unease grows gradually, not sudden, as though the hall itself presses on attention. Those who leave the hall slowly regain normal perception. Exiting into open air, sunlight, or evening light removes the weight and cold. The echoes vanish. The figures fade from memory, though the sensation of being observed lingers for minutes or hours. Steps outside feel lighter, sound returns to normal, and breathing eases. By day, the hall appears ordinary. Wood is warm under fingertips. Sunlight glances off windows. Shadows are simple and static. Dust floats in stillness. The space seems perfectly preserved but inactive, giving no hint of what occurs after dark. At night, St. Lucia's forgotten hall reclaims its presence. Figures pace endlessly, whispers carry along walls, footsteps echo unpredictably, and cold pressure reminds visitors of the Halla's attention. The experience is immersive, subtle, and persistent, leaving a lasting impression of history, memory, and the weight of observation. For those who enter after dark, the hall teaches awareness. It is not hostile, but it is attentive. Every sound, shadow, and step is part of the space, a reminder that some places hold memory longer than life itself. And that St. Lucia's forgotten hall continues its quiet vigil for anyone willing to witness it. Bethlehem ruin stands solemnly on a hill, its stone walls cracked and partially collapsed. Its stone walls cracked and partially collapsed. The roof is missing in sections, leaving beams exposed to the sky. Sunlight illuminates fallen pews and scattered fragments of stained glass. By day, the church appears abandoned and quiet, a relic of devotion and time, a place where wind and birds fill the empty spaces. A relic of devotion and time, a place where wind and birds fill the empty spaces. Visitors walk carefully over uneven cobblestones, aware of the fragility of the structure, and the sense of history lingering in each broken stone. Aware of the fragility of the structure, and the sense of history lingering in each broken stone. As evening approaches, the atmosphere begins to shift. Shadows lengthen across the crumbling walls, stretching farther than the sun allows. The wind carries faint whispers through the empty corridors, rustling debris and stirring loose leaves. The temperature cools, and the air becomes heavier, as if the ruins themselves are waiting for nightfall. Light from the setting sun paints long streaks across shattered windows and fallen pews, highlighting the gaps in walls and roof that define the broken interior. After sunset, the first sounds emerge. Doors bang softly, then more insistently, though they hang loosely or are no longer intact. The echoes reverberate through the nave, carried along stone and broken wood. No wind is strong enough to produce such precise movement. Visitors pause, scanning the shadows, but the source remains invisible. Each bang seems intentional, a rhythm that rises and falls, creating tension and attention with every beat. Figures begin to appear in the remaining windows. At first, they are faint, translucent forms kneeling or standing still. Moonlight or lingering evening glow illuminates the edges of their shapes, giving them the appearance of watching or waiting. They do not move outward, nor do they descend from the windows. They remain suspended, gazing into the nave or toward the altar with quiet purpose. Walking through the ruins, visitors often notice the shadows along the floor. Some seem to point subtly toward the altar, elongated and distorted by broken light and uneven flooring. They shift as one moves, as if subtly guiding attention, yet they do not physically interact. The combination of sounds and movement heightens awareness. Doors continue to creak and bang sporadically, as though the building itself breathes with a memory of past ceremonies. The figures in the windows remain still, their gaze fixed. Shadows extend and fold over the fallen pews, tracing lines that hint at formality and devotion. Visitors often feel a subtle pressure, the sensation of being watched without intrusion. Time behaves differently within the ruins. Minutes stretch. Steps echo longer than they should. Observers pause and feel as though the church itself holds them in place, drawing attention to specific areas. The dissonance between perception and reality creates an uneasy awareness, as if the church remembers every past service, every prayer, every presence that has passed through its doors. Bethlehem ruins once served as a center of worship for decades before partial collapse rendered it unusable. Parishioners and caretakers recall nights when wind and stone produced strange echoes, when shadows seemed alive, and when doors creaked without cause. Over time, visitors have described similar events, figures in windows, sounds of banging, and shadows pointing toward the altar, as if guiding attention or replaying memory. Natural explanations exist, though they do not account for the consistency. Wind through broken walls produces sound, and uneven surfaces distort shadows. And uneven surfaces distort shadows. Footsteps on debris create echoes. Footsteps on debris create echoes. Light from the moon can illuminate translucent surfaces and objects, creating the impression of figures. Light from the moon can illuminate translucent surfaces and objects, creating the impression of figures. Creating the impression of figures. Yet the phenomena persist under calm conditions, when wind is absent and visitors move slowly. Yet the phenomena persist under calm conditions, when wind is absent and visitors move slowly. When wind is absent and visitors move slowly, figures remain consistent in location, shadows point deliberately, and door sounds follow patterns that suggest more than random movement. Figures remain consistent in location, shadows point deliberately, and door sounds follow patterns that suggest more than random movement. Shadows point deliberately, and door sounds follow patterns that suggest more than random movement. And door sounds follow patterns that suggest more than random movement. Visitors often describe a profound sense of reverence. The combination of shadows, sounds, and figures creates a deep emotional resonance. There is no threat, but the space feels charged with memory. Walking toward the altar, or following the lines of shadows, feels natural and deliberate, as if the church itself directs attention to its most sacred remaining spaces. By morning, Bethlehem ruins appears inert. Sunlight illuminates cracks and fallen beams. The figures in windows vanish. Shadows shorten and behave as expected. The echoes fade. Visitors may question what they saw and heard, though memory preserves it with startling clarity. The church seems quiet and empty, waiting for the next night when moonlight and darkness return to awaken its presence. At night, when shadows lengthen and silence deepens, the church comes alive again. Doors bang, echoes fill the nave, shadows stretch toward the altar. Figures kneel in windows as though in silent prayer. The building does not threaten. It preserves memory. It guides attention. And for those who walk among its ruins under moonlight, Bethlehem recalls the devotion, ritual, and quiet intensity of centuries past. Allowing visitors to witness history replayed subtly in stone, shadow, and sound. Holy Trinity Watch rises quietly above a narrow courtyard, its stone walls etched with centuries of history. By day, the church appears solid and serene, sunlight tracing the edges of stained glass and worn wooden doors. Visitors move through the nave in measured steps, noting the high ceilings, carved pews, and the faint scent of old wood and candle wax. The church feels complete, calm, and aware of its own weight in the world. Below ground, crypts and hidden corridors extend like veins beneath the stone floor. The air in these spaces is cool and damp, carrying the scent of earth and ancient stone. Every step taken above is echoed faintly in these corridors, bouncing from walls and arches in ways that suggest presence without revealing origin. Visitors report hearing footsteps that are not their own, moving along passages that twist and descend into darkness. The sound is deliberate and rhythmic, a slow procession that pulses with unseen intent. They hover just above the steps, drifting smoothly up and down as though carried by invisible hands. Their glow is soft but steady, illuminating worn stone and the edges of crypt doors. Visitors may follow them instinctively, drawn forward by their quiet motion. The air grows heavier with each step. It presses lightly against the chest and shoulders, subtle at first, then increasingly tangible. Breathing feels measured, as if the space itself influences rhythm and pace. Movement through the church requires attention, each footfall contributing to a larger awareness of space, presence, and the unseen activity below. Stone stairways spiral downward, narrow and uneven. The walls absorb sound, yet footsteps continue to echo, carrying weight and distance unnaturally far. Visitors descend cautiously into crypts. Figures are glimpsed in peripheral vision. They appear as blurred shapes moving slowly through corridors or near crypt doors. Observers may catch a brief outline of a figure bending or shifting, only to have it vanish moments later. No sound accompanies the movement beyond the echoes already present. The figures remain indistinct, hovering on the threshold between presence and memory. The crypts feel alive. Stone surfaces reflect light subtly, changing texture as shadows pass. Each echo of a step, each flicker of lantern light, seems to hold history, as if the church remembers every footfall and every passing moment. Visitors sense rhythm and purpose in the movement below, an ongoing presence that mirrors the living yet remains invisible. Time becomes uneven. Minutes stretch, compressed by the echoing corridors and drifting lanterns. Steps feel longer than they should. Wandering slowly through familiar stone yet arriving at different points than expected. The church seems to preserve memory and attention, folding past and present together without notice. Sound is layered. Echoes overlap with moans of air through cracks in the stone. Visitors feel a subtle pressure from all directions, aware that space and sound are orchestrated together. The crypts grow narrower, walls closer, ceilings lower. Lantern lights drift just ahead, creating paths that feel intentional. Figures occasionally appear near stairways or corners, bending or shifting briefly, then disappearing. Their presence is felt more than seen, reinforcing the sense that the church is alive in layers beyond the material. Visitors eventually return to the nave. The heavier air dissipates slightly, yet echoes linger. Lantern lights vanish as quickly as they appeared. The stone feels solid and unmoving, yet awareness of what lies below remains. The church holds memory and rhythm in every surface, preserving presence without form. Those who leave carry a lasting impression. They recall the echo of unseen footsteps, the drifting lanterns, and the brief figures glimpsed along corridors. The drifting lanterns. And the brief figures glimpsed along corridors. Time feels altered in memory. The weight of air and the layered sounds leaving subtle tension. The experience is immersive, affecting perception of space and movement long after exiting. Long after exiting. Locals speak of Holy Trinity watch quietly. They remember centuries of worship, life, and ceremony, layered upon the crypts and corridors below. Nights when visitors encounter unseen activity are treated with reverence. The church is not threatening, but aware. It observes and preserves. By day, it welcomes parishioners and visitors with calm structure. By night, it becomes a space where echoes, light, and presence intertwine. Footsteps move where none appear, lanterns drift without hands, and figures remain just beyond perception. Holy Trinity watch continues its presence. Those who enter after dusk walk through stone and shadow. History and memory. Presence and absence. Holy Trinity watch. Reminds all who enter that some spaces preserve awareness. That movement can exist without form. And that the weight of history is felt as deeply as it is seen. St. Catharine's Hollow rests quietly amidst a cluster of trees, its stone walls small and weathered, built long ago with care and devotion. By day, the chapel appears unassuming yet solemn. Sunlight glances off worn masonry, and the small wooden door invites those seeking quiet reflection. Inside, the space is intimate. Pews are simple, the altar modest, and the air carries the faint scent of aged wood and lingering incense. Visitors feel the weight of history, a sense that countless prayers have passed through the walls over the centuries. As evening falls, the atmosphere transforms. Shadows stretch along the stone floor and up the walls. The air grows cooler, heavy with stillness. The faint sound of wind through nearby branches carries softly into the chapel. But within, silence dominates, thick and almost tangible. It presses gently against the body, heightening awareness of every subtle sound and movement. Then the prayers begin. Voices emerge softly, repeating in rhythm across the small chapel. The language is unfamiliar, syllables flowing in measured cadence. Each phrase is distinct yet blends into a continuous chant. The prayers do not rise or fall in volume, instead weaving a constant tapestry of devotion. They seem to come from no single source, filling the space from floor to ceiling, moving through pews and along aisles. Shadows appear along the edges of vision. Forms kneel silently on the floor, backs straight, heads bowed. Their outlines are human, yet undefined, blurred at the edges by low light. Observers notice that the shadows move subtly, adjusting positions but never leaving the floor or crossing the aisle. Their presence feels deliberate, ritualistic, and enduring. The whispering begins next. Soft voices call names, gentle yet unmistakable. They are personal, as if directed toward each individual present. The sound is never loud or forceful, but clear enough to draw attention. The whispers do not repeat words from the prayers. They exist separately, carrying a sense of awareness and observation that reaches beyond the sound of the chant. The combination of prayer and whisper shapes perception. Time feels stretched. Minutes blend as the mind focuses on sound and motion. The shadows kneeling along pews appear in patterns, moving only slightly as though responding to the rhythm of unseen devotion. The whispers weave through these forms, guiding attention and creating the impression of presence beyond what the eye can fully confirm. Even light behaves strangely. Moonlight filters through the small windows, casting faint beams across the stone floor. Candlelight flickers along the altar and walls, though inspection often reveals no candle or flame. The shadows lengthen and contract subtly in ways that do not align with light sources. Reflection off polished wood surfaces suggests movement beyond physical forms, enhancing the sense that the chapel is quietly alive. Visitors describe a sensation of being watched. It is not threatening, but undeniable. Awareness sharpens instinctively. Movement within the space does not diminish the effect. Standing still amplifies it. The whispers calling names feel directed, confirming presence without revealing its source. It is an attention that is patient, persistent, and measured, neither cruel nor hurried. The prayers continue without end. The repetition is hypnotic. Phrases rise and fall in rhythm with the faint movement of shadows. Observers notice consistency in cadence, a cycle that has existed perhaps for decades, carried forward in perception, memory, or something embedded within the chapel itself. Shadows remain kneeling at the altar. Some appear closer to the observer than others. They never rise. They never speak. Their stillness contrasts with the layered soundscape of prayers and whispers, producing a profound sense of reverence. Observers feel compelled to acknowledge their presence, even without interaction. The combined effect is immersive and disorienting. Sound, shadow, and light work together to create a chapel larger than its physical dimensions. Awareness narrows, time stretches, and focus is drawn repeatedly toward kneeling forms, whispered names, and the flowing rhythm of prayer. Observers experience participation in the ritual without agency, caught between observer and presence. By dawn, the chapel resumes its ordinary state. Shadows settle. Prayers fade. Whispers vanish. Light pours naturally through windows. The pews, altar, and stone walls appear unchanged. The intimate space returns to its daytime calm, leaving visitors with memory rather than evidence. Those who enter after dark carry the experience with them. They remember the rhythm of repeated prayer, the shifting shadows, and the gentle calling of names. They recall the sensation of presence, observation, and quiet ritual, all embedded in the small stone chapel. The impression lingers, shaping perception long after leaving the building. St. Catharine's Hollow endures as a space of devotion, memory, and reflection. By day, it is quiet and solemn, welcoming visitors with history and calm. By night, it reveals another layer, alive with whispers, prayers, and kneeling shadows. Preserving the patterns of devotion and presence that have persisted for generations. In this space, silence is never empty. It carries memory, repetition, and attentive observation. Quietly asserting that some prayers continue long after they are spoken. Gracefield abandoned church rises quietly among overgrown hedges and cracked cobblestones, its stone walls darkened with time and weathered by decades of exposure. The spire points skyward, its cross still intact despite rust and age. Sunlight filters through broken panes, casting fractured patterns of color across the worn stone floors. The surrounding cemetery leans unevenly toward the sky, gravestones etched with names barely legible. The air carries a distinct scent. The lingering aroma of old incense clings to the walls and pews, a faint reminder of rituals long ended. It is heavy and slightly sweet, mingling with the mustiness of damp wood and stone. Visitors notice it immediately upon entering, a signal that the space has retained the memory of devotion despite abandonment. Shadows lengthen across the interior, stretching along the pews and into corners that seem to deepen as the light fades. The sound of footsteps echoes softly across the stone floors. The building seems larger than during the day, each archway and alcove carrying the weight of silence and expectation. Visitors often hear at first, movement. A soft shuffle, subtle but deliberate, emanates from the corners of the nave. Occasionally, it is accompanied by faint coughing, shallow and irregular. The sound suggests presence without origin. No doors open. Yet the footsteps echo in rhythm with the observer's attention, impossible to locate yet undeniably near. Figures appear briefly near the altar. At first, they are mere shadows, elongated by dim light from the windows. Gradually, outlines become discernible, human in shape, kneeling or standing. They do not move as one expects. Their gestures are slow, almost ceremonial. Vanishing from view the instant the observer directs focused attention toward them. The altar itself seems heavier, charged, as if bearing the weight of the forms that appear and vanish. The stained glass adds another layer to the experience. Faces are seen in the colored panes, staring outward as if observing visitors directly. The features are indistinct at first, shadows formed by light and time, yet unmistakably present. When sunlight or moonlight shifts, the expressions appear to move subtly, tilting toward the observer or turning slightly with the angle of vision. It is never threatening, but impossible to ignore. Footsteps continue throughout the interior. They echo along aisles and corridors, sometimes soft, sometimes deliberate. They do not align with the observer's own pace. The rhythm seems independent yet responsive, moving from one end of the nave to another, crossing hallways, returning in loops that defy explanation. Each step adds to the impression that the church is aware of presence, marking each visitor with a silent acknowledgement. The air feels heavier as the night deepens. Temperature drops subtly, the breath of visitors visible in faint clouds near their faces. The scent of incense intensifies slightly, deeper and more concentrated. Shadows shift in corners. Light flickers against the stained glass, highlighting figures that may or may not remain visible. Every sense becomes heightened, as if the building itself has tuned awareness to the movement of its occupants. Figures near the altar vanish when approached. Footsteps recede when followed. Faces in the glass appear only when the observer glances quickly. Each sensory hint seems deliberate, a careful balance between presence and absence. The space challenges perception, blending memory, expectation, and observation. Despite the quiet, a subtle pressure builds, compelling them to move or retreat. It is not fear in the traditional sense, but a physical sensation of awareness, the weight of the church pressing lightly against the body. Many choose to exit after this experience, stepping out into the evening air with a heightened sense of caution. By dawn, Gracefield abandoned church returns to stillness. Footsteps are gone. Figures vanish completely. The stained glass appears inert once more. Light reflects off the stone floors, revealing only shadows cast by pews and pillars. Locals speak quietly of the church. They describe it as a place that remembers. That the faint sounds, the figures, and the shifting reflections are echoes of devotion preserved by stone and memory. Some warn visitors to respect the building, to move cautiously, to understand that even abandonment cannot erase the weight of the past. Those who experience it carry the memory. They recall footsteps that are not theirs. Coughing in empty corridors. Figures kneeling at the altar that vanish when approached. Faces staring from the stained glass. The air dense with incense, the subtle chill of awareness, and the sense of a building observing without malice, simply acknowledging presence. Gracefield abandoned church remains standing. Stone walls, stained glass, and the heavy spire endure. By day, it appears quiet and inert. By night, it continues to communicate through subtle sound, shadow, and scent, offering a space where the past persists in ways that can be sensed but not fully explained. Visitors leave changed, aware that some buildings retain memory and presence, even when empty of life. Oldesty. David sits at the edge of town, surrounded by open fields and the distant hum of roads that fade into quiet. The church appears weathered but steadfast, stone walls darkened by age and time, a tall steeple rising against the sky. The wooden doors stand heavy yet inviting, windows tall and narrow, their glass catching sunlight in muted color. The place seems isolated, a structure holding centuries of presence quietly at the border of town. As evening falls, the atmosphere shifts. Shadows deepen across the exterior, stretching the steeple and walls into elongated shapes. The air grows cooler, carrying the scent of earth and old wood. The quiet becomes noticeable, heavier than ordinary stillness. Wind is absent or minimal, leaving only the faint rustle of leaves from distant trees. Visitors approaching the church feel the change immediately, a subtle tension in the space surrounding the building. Bells toll unexpectedly. The sound is deep and sonorous, echoing across the empty fields and distant streets. It arrives without apparent cause, no one pulling ropes or operating machinery. Each toll lingers, resonating through the air and within the mind. The rhythm is slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Visitors pause, instinctively respectful, but also unsettled. The nave stretches long and shadowed, pews lining either side in straight rows. Light from windows falls in narrow shafts, illuminating dust particles that float in the still air. The silence inside is different from outside, thick and charged. Every footstep echoes, amplified by walls and vaulted ceilings, yet seems insufficient to fill the space entirely. Figures begin to appear. They walk slowly along the aisles, human in outline but vague in detail. Some pause near the altar, others move past pews without acknowledgement of those present. Their steps are quiet, almost gliding across the floor. Observers report that the figures are not threatening, but their presence is undeniable, tangible in the sense of proximity and awareness. The doors behave unpredictably. Visitors who enter freely sometimes find the wooden doors closing behind them without resistance. There is no wind, no mechanism visible. The heavy doors swing to a shut position and latch quietly, as if the church itself wishes to mark the entrance. Attempting to reopen them may take effort, and in some cases the doors resist, swinging slowly and reluctantly. Footsteps echo differently in the presence of figures. Every sound seems heightened, sharper, resonating along the wooden pews and stone floors. The echo follows movement, lingering slightly longer than expected. Observers become more aware of each shift of weight, each step, and even the subtle sound of clothing brushing against benches or walls. The church responds to attention. Figures may pause when looked at directly, or they may continue walking, appearing to glide just outside the line of sight. Shadows lengthen and bend as if stretching toward or away from observers. The experience creates a heightened sense of presence, a feeling that the space itself is aware of who is there and how they move. Whispers and low murmurs can sometimes be heard. The space seems to be watching, anticipating the next movement. They are indistinct, fragmented, rising and fading in the still air. The tone is cautionary, often perceived as gentle warnings or reminders rather than speech. Visitors describe an awareness of being observed or advised, an intangible interaction with the church and its lingering energy. The hull of the nave carries weight. The longer someone remains, the more noticeable the pressure becomes. It is subtle, not painful, felt in the chest or shoulders, as though the space itself wishes attention and movement to be deliberate. Standing still may intensify the sensation, while walking slowly along the aisles reduces it slightly. Time seems altered within the church. Minutes stretch and compress unpredictably. A brief pause may feel like several moments. Walking the full length of the nave can take far longer than expected. Observers become attuned to the space in a way that distorts conventional perception, focusing entirely on the interplay of light, shadow, sound, and movement. The bells may toll again without warning. Each chime resonates through the building and into the surrounding night. The echo is rich and layered, heightening awareness of space and presence. Observers often pause, instinctively listening for a pattern or source, yet find only the sound itself, haunting and deliberate. Exiting the church restores normal perception. Stepping outside brings relief. Air feels lighter, sound returns to ordinary levels, and the doors behave predictably. The figures and whispers fade from immediate perception, though memory carries the impression of presence, movement, and subtle unease. Old St. David's endures through day and night. During daylight hours, it is a quiet, aged church, appearing ordinary and solid. At night, it becomes a place where history lingers, where shadows move, voices whisper, and doors mark passage beyond ordinary expectation. Visitors who enter after dark often leave with lasting impressions. The tolling of bells, the silent figures walking the aisles, the doors closing of their own accord. And the weight of the space remain in memory. Oldesty. David's teaches awareness, patience, and respect. Revealing that some places are shaped not only by stone and timber, but by the energy and presence of those who came before. And for anyone who steps across its threshold, the church offers both sanctuary and caution. A quiet reminder that some spaces hold more than they seem. And that presence can exist even where no one is visibly standing. Thank you for walking with me through the haunted old town churches of Virginia tonight. These churches are full of history, faith, and fear. The walls remember every prayer, every loss, and every soul that lingered too long. If you ever enter an old church after dark and hear footsteps, whispers, or bells without source, take care. Some spirits are not gone, and some never forgive intrusion. Would you dare kneel in one of these haunted churches after sunset, or would you leave before the shadows fully awaken? Rest well, my friend. Until our next journey into the haunted past.